Hey everyone, so great to see you again. It's Judy from Coffee, Cookies, and Books, and what we're going to talk about today is the books that disappointed me the most in 2025. Okay, so I really hate saying the worst books of 2025. I would only classify maybe half of these, what I would call the worst books. I would classify the other half as kind of, the biggest disappointing reads that I had for the year. So we're going to go from DNF up to 2.5 stars because that's the middle. And in perfect honesty, that is the least amount of what I read this year fell into those categories. Now, I am not giving you all of the books that I read that were in those categories. I'm just going to give you the ones that really hurt the most to read. In the DNF category, which is what we're going to go through first, I really didn't have that many, okay? Most of the DNFs I had were like what I would call soft DNFs. And I actually went through and read all of the soft DNFs that I did have. So they didn't really stay on my DNF list because then they got read and they got rated. So these ones here, I'm only going to talk about 3. And 2 of them were what I would consider examples of kind of how I DNF. And then the other one is one that is an example of something that I kind of have reconsidered to be a soft DNF. And it's going to go back into my TBR and get pulled again at some time. So I do have sort of these 3 categories, okay? So the first one is the situation where I read about 50% of the book and I just realize that it's really just not for me, or maybe I get to the 50% mark and something really changes in the book. And that happened with the Jinn-Bot of Shantiport. I read it, and about up to the 50% mark, it was okay. It was probably running, 2.5 stars. It was not up there, but it was enough that, I would finish it. But then it did a bit of a flip in the middle. And I don't want to say what that flip is or anything like that for anybody who might want to read it. But it kind of changed what I felt was the beginning tone of the book to something that just flipped the story for me. So I DNF'd it. I was not interested in going any further into it. And I went on and I read some of the reviews, and it was, it was exactly what I thought was going to happen. And I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to continue with the book. So I did DNF that one at 50%. So that's like kind of a perfect example of a book that had really interested me at the beginning. It had kind of a sci-fi feel to it. It had a couple of really interesting characters and a world that was quite dynamic. But then it kind of fell off in the middle. So that's an example of that. The next example is an example of when I pick up a book and I start reading it, and it's like immediately I know this book is not for me. Okay. And now that tends to happen very little. But I do feel that if it's going to happen, it's going to be something that's kind of in the fantasy or sci-fi realm. That usually doesn't happen for me that much in thrillers or anything like that, because usually the book will carry me through on the story. And there are a few of those in here as well as we get up into the higher stars. So it was The House of Bane and Blood by Alexis Menard. Now, I think that I got about 50 pages in. It's like, it's not for me. I think that in general, I don't I'm not a huge fan. It's not that I don't like it completely, but I am not a huge fan of kind of fantasy with gothic, with steampunk like that. And this is very much where that story kind of falls in there. It's a fantasy romance, but it falls kind of in that category. And I didn't like it right from the beginning. And it was like 50 pages in, it's a DNF. And I'm not going to read it. I mean, luckily I read it on Kindle Unlimited, didn't have to pay for it. So it was no great loss. It was not like it was a book that I purchased or anything like that. Same with the Jinn-Bot of Shantiport. I did purchase it, but I bought it from Book Outlet on its sale. So I got it really cheap. And it's going to get resold again. Well, that or it'll go. No, actually, I think I took it and I put it in a little free library. That's what I did with that one. So that's the two. The other example, the last example for the DNFs that we're going to talk about are DNFs that I soft DNF. Now, this one is Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. And I DNF'd it at about 100 pages. Now, I initially felt I wasn't going to go back to it, but I've kind of changed my mind after I've thought about it. And I think I want to explore it a little bit further into it. I think it's about a 600 page book. So I want to kind of give it a little bit more. I have enough interest in it to do that. Now, when it does come up in the TBR, I likely will start from page 1 and go in. Probably will skim the first 100 pages because I did read those, but just enough to kind of refresh where I was, and then I'll continue on with it. So at some point it's going to come up again and I will read it again. But I know that I think the third book he's written for the series is coming out next year, I think, but the second book is already out. So if I read it and I do like it, like for me to continue a series, it has to be like 2.5 to 3 stars, and then I'll continue on with it because 2.5, 3 stars right in the middle, and that's enough for me to generate enough interest that I'll continue on with the series. So we'll see how that goes. So that's kind of it for my DNFs. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start with 1-star reads. And 1-star reads are the reads I read the whole book and I really didn't like the whole book. I wouldn't say that there was anything in it. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the plot. I didn't like how the relationships built, the world building. Didn't like anything. Now, there's not a lot of them. I had 3 1-star books. That was it. So really, not that many hit the 1-star mark. You know, you have to say I really didn't like the book for it to hit 1 stars. So the first one, it was a novella, and I just read it. It was a Christmas read, and it was called How Luca Gugino Stole Christmas. Essentially, the main character, goes to Rome to visit her family there for the holidays, and she gets there and she can't get a ride to wherever it is. Don't even remember, if I'm being perfectly honest. And so she ends up, the guy who comes to pick her up is not her ex, but he's like this guy that when they were teenagers in Toronto, she fell for him and he broke her heart. So that's how the story is. Completely fluff story. There was nothing to it. I mean, thank God it was a novella and it was really short. I read through it. Couldn't get back the time that I spent reading it, which was not a lot, but still, because I read with my eyeballs. I do not do audiobooks. I don't retain anything from a book when I do audio. But if I'm going to be honest, I read this and I do not remember anything. I don't even remember her name, the character's name. I only remember his because it's on the cover of the book. So that was really a super disappointing read for me. What are you going to get from a novella? Maybe not much, but when I do my best list, okay, one of the first books that's on there as 5 stars is a novella. It was fantastic, okay? And that is what, like when you read a novella, because it's so short, it really should make an impact, say what it's got to say, and leave you at the end thinking, wow, right? So this did not do that, obviously, and I couldn't even recommend it. Yeah, if I'm being frank, I wouldn't recommend it. The next one that I read was called Remember the Fear, and it was an ebook that I got for free off BookBub, and one of the worst written books I've read in a long time. It was a FBI serial killer murder investigation. Don't remember the two main characters, male, female, two main characters. There's no like romance or anything. It's just strictly FBI investigation. And I do recall that the case ties back to the female FBI agent. That much I remember. Didn't like the dialogue. Thought it was terribly written between them. A lot of things didn't make sense. You know, like they would walk into a crime scene and they would know automatically everything that's happening. And it's like, you just got there. Like you haven't even talked to anybody and you just got there. So it was just, the whole book was like that. And I probably should have DNF'd it, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it was pretty short. I don't remember how long exactly, but it was a long book. Didn't like it. Wouldn't recommend it. The next one was a huge disappointment for me. Really wanted to like this book. Was The Close-Up by Pip Drysdale. So this is a story about a young girl, and she is young. I think she, if I recall, she might be 19, 20. Like she's really young. And at like 19, she got $1 million contract for 2 books. That alone kind of sent red flags up, okay? But, okay. She wrote the first book. It did well, but they needed the second book from her, and she just, nothing was coming. And she had moved from her home in England to LA. But what transpired through the book was just useless drivel. It just, okay, rich people behaving badly, yes. But it, yeah, just, I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the plot of the book. Nothing about it appealed to me, like nothing. So I can honestly say I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, and I gave it 1 star. So those were the 3 books that probably disappointed me the most. But, you know, I mean, even so, like I would say that while I wouldn't recommend them and I didn't like them, doesn't mean that somebody else won't like them. So I can say that out of the 3, The Close-Up was probably the most well-written. I didn't have any complaints about the actual writing in the book. It was just the whole book itself as a story. It didn't appeal to me. Okay, so that's why I wouldn't recommend it. But it doesn't mean someone else wouldn't like that, because it is not a badly written book. So just want to state that. The other 2, okay. So then what we're going to do is we're going to go on to our 2-star books. I apologize if the camera angle has changed a little bit, but I had to check something and I had to take the camera off the tripod, put it back on. So we're back and we're in working order. Okay, so 2-star books. Now, I actually had in total 12 2-star books. I'm only going to go over 5 of them with you. And these are the 5 that I would say you know, like when I got the 2 stars, or some of them were what I would call expectations. I kind of expected them to be 2 stars. These ones were the ones that I didn't expect to be 2 stars. So that's why I thought I'd go over those ones instead. So the first one is The Scourge Between Stars. And it was a novella. I think it was 150 to 200 pages, somewhere in there. Sci-fi. And it is about a large group of people in this old broken down ship trying to travel back to Earth. So that's like the overall arcing story. And this particular ship is haunted. Well, not haunted, but infested. That's the best way to put it. Overall, I thought that it was an interesting premise. I thought that it had potential. It just didn't happen in the book. Okay. There something about it just didn't work for me. And I was disappointed with it. Like, I just wanted it to be so much more. And I think the length of the book was what did it. And part of that was because you got no backstory, really. Like, you could not understand why these people allowed themselves, because that's how I felt about it, to get into the situation that they were in, which was pretty dire. It didn't feel right. That didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it came together. And then how they hunted this particular thing didn't feel like it came together. Like, it was kind of a cross between, I don't even know. Like, it had like a bit of an Aliens feel to it, but even that didn't feel right to me, because there were all these people on the ship, not just this crew. Okay. So this crew was not completely isolated. At least they shouldn't have been, you know? So it was just, yeah, it just didn't work for me. I wish it had, because I think it would have been better. I also, like I said, I think it would have been better as a longer book, and even almost in installments, kind of like the idea of The Expanse, and how that, I think this had that much potential, and it just fell super short of it. So anyway, that's that one. Next one is A Beauty Queen's Guide to Murder. So I read this and I expected it to be like a cozy mystery type thing. And so it starts out with this girl. Don't even ask me the character's name, because I do not remember. But in it, her mother has passed away. Now, she has been gone almost a year at the point that the book starts. And each month, she gives her daughter something as kind of like, it was her gift to her daughter, because she knew, I think she died of cancer. Okay. So they get to the point where her mother wants her to be in a beauty pageant. No idea why. I can't remember. I'm sure her mother gave her a reason. Anyway, so I'm like, okay, well, that was interesting. So, you know, kind of leading into this, that the murder is going to take place at a beauty pageant, obviously. And it does. And her aunt, who is one of the coordinators of the pageant, becomes the suspect. So this is how she kind of gets involved in the whole investigation thing. But then from there, it just unraveled. And it just didn't. It was not a great story. It was mediocre at best. And even the potential love interest, who was I think the detective that was investigating, even he was weird. Like, just the whole thing was really weird. And yeah, didn't like it. Didn't care for it, which is unfortunate, because I think there's a sequel. Like, I think it's a series, and I'm not continuing on with the series because I didn't care for how the structure of the book was. And my thought is always, you know, with these cozy mysteries, if you don't like the first one and you don't like how the first one was structured, you're likely not going to like anything else that they write going forward, because they tend, cozy mystery writers tend to follow a very specific flow to their books. And yeah, this one just didn't do it for me. Next one, well, actually, these next three are what I would call really huge disappointments. They were all books that I thought were going to be 4 or 5 star reads, and they were not. First one is this book called Bury Me by Ashley Winstead. Now, I tried rereading this because I felt that I read it initially during a readathon, and I thought maybe it was just I was a bit burnt out from having read so many, because it was towards the end of the month of that readathon. And I thought, well, I'll reread this. And I tried rereading it with another book, which is going to come up when I talk about my best books of 2025. I got halfway through the reread and gave up. So the reason I didn't like it initially is because the story was about a girl who lost her father right at the very beginning. She was university age, 23, 24, I think somewhere in around there. And she gets involved with a bunch of people online that do sleuthing, you know, online detective type thing. And she gets involved in that, and it kind of goes from there. But it was very slow, and it was very depressing. Like, it gives depressing a whole new meaning, okay? And it was because the character was depressed, and I kind of get that. So for me, the last maybe 100 pages of the book, I enjoyed. The very beginning of the book and kind of her story, that little bit I liked, but everything in between, it dragged on. I just didn't like it. So, I gave it 2 stars. It disappointed me to give it 2 stars. That was how it was. And after rereading like half of the book, it still was a 2-star read. So the next one, another huge disappointment, was The Favorites by Layne Fargo. And I'm going to tell you that the only reason The Favorites got a 2-star from me was because of the inserts in the book, because the book it's got documentary sections in it about this ice figure skating couple, and the documentary insertion parts, they were the only parts I enjoyed of the book. The very first beginning was okay, but then it got more toxic and more teenage toxic, and yeah, just wasn't for me. It wasn't the story for me. I mean, it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it goes. I can totally see why some people would like it. I was not one of those people. So, now, it doesn't mean I won't try anything from Layne Fargo again. I didn't dislike the structure of the book. I didn't dislike because it did a lot of past, present type. Didn't dislike that or anything like that. So I would read something else from Layne Fargo. And she's got another one out, one of her older backlist ones that I know comes up from time to time on Book Outlet. So at some point I probably will grab it if I can get my hands on it. And I will try to read another one from her. Same thing with Ashley Winstead. For sure, I'll read something else from her. And the same thing with this next book. It is Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. I read that recently, this fall, at some point this fall. Can't remember exactly when, October maybe. And I gave it 2 stars. Didn't dislike her writing. I just didn't like the 2 main characters, the husband and wife. I didn't like either of them. I think that was on purpose. I think. I could be wrong. I didn't dislike the story. A little bit in the middle, dragged quite a bit. Kind of liked the ending. I thought it was weird, but okay with it. but it was still just a 2-star read. So I think for me, it's like the characters are one of the key things, which I think is clear in a lot of these books. If I don't like the characters, then I'm not going to like the book. And that was what happened with both The Favorites and Beautiful Ugly. Didn't like the characters. So, then we're on to the 2.5 stars. So the 2.5 stars, I had 9 of them in total. Most 2.5 stars, I think a lot of them are just books that I read and they're just okay. A lot of them tend to be ebooks. And I think that's a bit of a reflection on the fact that I read physical books. I just feel I get more out of them. So if they hit the 2.5 mark and it's a physical book, which these 3 are, then that was they really kind of sit pretty close to those 2-star books, okay, that were also physical. Hitchcock Hotel is the first one, and it is a thriller, and it's about this guy who's bought this hotel and he's made it into a Hitchcock museum, and he's invited his college friends and murder, mystery, all that sort of thing. It just really didn't interest me. Again, I didn't like the characters, and it fell flat for me. I continued on to the ending, and even the ending, I was kind of like, meh, you know? So, didn't care for it. I don't even have a lot to say because I don't even remember that much. Now, I know I read this February or March, I think I read it. And yeah, was not a high point at the beginning of the year for me. Next one was Hurricane Wars. And Hurricane Wars is a fantasy romance. I would say the fantasy is the larger part. The romance is kind of a very minor part. Important, but a minor part. It is kind of like a marriage of convenience sort of story between these 2 groups and these 2 people that essentially want to kill each other. And people don't like each other and they're at war. The whole thing, though, felt weird to me. The whole world felt weird to me. I had a very difficult time figuring out how the ships worked, how the world worked, and as far as how they attacked each other. It kind of got towards the end why the war happened, but still not 100%. The one male main character, his father played a key role, but his father was, like, I didn't understand that 100% either. Didn't hate it, though. And I do have Monsoon Rising, which is the second book in the series. So I will read that because I do have it. And at a 2.5, I will continue on with it. It is a perfect example, though, of where, when people talk about these fantasy books and how they're really long and you need a lot of world building in these fantasy books, which is completely true, unless your story is 100% character based, you need a lot of backstory. And I felt the backstory was not the strength of this book. The characters were, which is why it will carry me through into the next book, Monsoon Rising. Because I did like, especially the 2 main characters, I did like the 2 main characters. I just didn't like the story that much. But I didn't hate it. So that was that one. Last book we're going to talk about is Ghost Camera. Now, Ghost Camera by Darcy Coates is a collection of short stories, with the main story being about this ghost camera. It was, I think, the longest story in the book. It was the only story I really, really liked in the book. Like I would say that story held up to about a 4 stars, whereas the other stories in the book just didn't, and I gave the whole book 2.5 stars. So it's not a reflection on whether or not I like Darcy Coates' writing, and I do have a couple of other books from her that are not short story, but that are full books. But it's just the rest of the stories just didn't really do it for me. And this is where kind of the novella thing comes in a little bit too for me, is I typically don't care for short stories. So I've kind of come to that conclusion. Now I do have another book that I purchased recently, and it was the Aardvark special that has 8 short stories from 8 horror writers. And I do plan on reading that. And we will see how I feel about that. But I am not a short story person. And it's the same thing with novellas. They don't always hit great for me. So I think that's part of it with Ghost Camera. So, you know, in essence, I did like the main story about the Ghost Camera. I actually would have liked that to be expanded on and made a larger part of that book. If it had been half the book, like that would have been spectacular. But anyway, I didn't dislike her writing though. So I am looking forward to kind of reading another book by her and see how it goes. So that is actually it for my most disappointing reads for 2025. I probably didn't do great with explaining why I didn't like them. I mean, I'm one of these people, like, if I just didn't like a book, I just didn't like a book. It just didn't hit right for me, you know? And then it's funny because I am reading a book right now. Well, I just finished it. And it is a book that I know a lot of people didn't really love. And I loved it, and it's going to go on my best list for 2025 because I'm filming this in around mid-December, just a little past mid-December. So, you know, I'm surprised. I loved it. But I think that happens with I think that's just how reading is for all of us, right? We like that, which is why I say, even when somebody does a review and they say they didn't like a book, that doesn't mean I won't buy it and I won't try it, because it doesn't mean I won't like it. Okay? So if the premise of the book sounds interesting, and I think, well, I don't know, you know, that sounds interesting to me, I'll go and I'll look into it. And then I might go and I might look at other reviews of that book, and then I might very well buy it. So that's kind of how I feel about a lot of books. So that's why I say, you know, take what I say with a grain of salt. And, you know, one of my YouTube friends, Amanda, I know she loved a few of these books that I've said I didn't like. So it is what it is. Her and I don't always have the same taste in books, but I respect her opinion, and I think she respects mine, because we're all different, right? Okay, so that's it for this video, and the next video that I'm going to have for you will be talking about my best books for 2025.